I'm going to talk to you about FPLOT. Does anybody have any idea what FPLOT might be? So it probably you're probably imagining this is some kind of graphing library or something like this. I decided I didn't have much time to prepare this. I decided I'd talk about something completely different, completely non-techy, but it's something that's been occupying my thoughts, energy and time outside of work a certain amount for a while. So I thought I'd come and talk to you about it. So what it is it's the Falmouth and Penryn Library of Things. Okay, so Library of Things. What do you think a Library of Things might be? Well, the clue's kind of in the title. It's a library where you go and borrow things, and it's of things rather than books. So let's think. Consider the drills in the sheds. So, as a statistic that I've seen quoted in a number of places, the average drill is used for 1 hour in its lifetime, yet half of US households own one. Now, I tried to track down these statistics, and everywhere I looked at it, it was a different amount of time. And I'm not sure how, there was no authoritative source, but you get the basic idea. There's lots of things like drills. I don't know why it was always a drill, people didn't mention, that people buy and don't use very much. And they couldn't be a significant outlay, some of them, and that's a massive waste of resources. Alternative, you could go to a tool hire place, but if you've just got to drill a couple of holes, that's quite expensive. You're probably paying 30, 40 quid to hire a drill for a day or two, which is a bit unnecessary. You can buy them, they're quite cheap to buy, but if you buy a cheap one, it's going to be a cheap one. It's not very good quality, it breaks well. Certainly no match for Cornish granite wall. My quite expensive drill doesn't get through that. And then what about your drill bits? You've got to get all of those. It all kind of adds up. And an interesting quote here from someone called Leo McGinniver, who was a marketer in the 1960s. Last year, 1 million quarter-inch drill bits were sold. Not because people wanted quarter-inch drill bits, but because they wanted quarter-inch holes. So that's what you're buying, is a hole. You don't really care about the drill or the drill bits. What you want is you want to drill some holes. So, looking at Library of Things, what sort of things? So, as I've mentioned, things that we don't use very often. Things that it doesn't make that much sense for us to own. And also expensive things that it's really hard to justify. Spending all this money for something you're not going to use very often. So examples, tools, camping equipment, party items. If you're having a party and all this stuff, you don't want to have to own this stuff. Cleaning items, you're moving out of your rented house and you've got to clean the carpet. A lot of these stuff, there are ways of renting them out there, but it's just a different approach. Extra furniture for guests, kitchen items. You know, if you might want to try making fresh pasta, but you don't need to buy your own pasta maker. You can just rent one. Musical equipment, sewing machines, stuff like that. And what are the benefits? So you save space. If you're not such an issue for people living in Cornwall as living in London, where a lot of people live in very small spaces, but you don't need to store these items, these bulky items that, like I say, you don't really use very often. You save money, you're not buying them. Reduce waste, there's less items, less actual items are needed, less of them produced, and less of them disposed of. There's a real crisis in this world of electronic waste. There's so much just, it can't be recycled, it can't be much happen to it, and it's all quite toxic. So if we can reduce this, it's a great thing. And for me, one of my, I think is really interesting is the idea of community cohesion. It's a kind of community focus. It's a way of bringing local people together, because it's community run, and it's a good way of helping people who don't have much. So, this is the basic idea. Now, I've known about the idea of a library of things or a tool library. They're often kind of, they're sometimes more focused. And it's just been something in the back of my head. And a couple of years ago, I was working for Crowdfunder up in Newquay, and we had a project come through called Borrow Don't Buy from Plymouth. And as you can see here, they raised £11,000 to set up their own library of things in Plymouth. And it's going really well now, 2 years later. And I saw this and I thought, yes, this, I need to do this. I'm going to make this happen. So, the first attempt, September 2017. So there's a Facebook group called CRAP, Falmouth and Penryn CRAP. It stands for Connecting Resources Associating People. It's a fantastic group. You want to give something away, That's what it's there for. There's a number of them around Cornwall now, have kind of spread around as a kind of tribute to it. So I put a call out on there because I thought these are people who have an interest in circular economy, kind of this kind of stuff. And a few people came along to a meeting, but nothing really happened. No one had enough time. There weren't enough people getting involved. It's something you need to put a certain amount of time. I don't have a lot of time. As you know, I've got a full-time job, and I've got kids, so there's only a certain amount of time I can put in, so I needed a team around me who could do it. So after a month or two, I kind of thought, oh, this isn't going to work. Let's forget about it. So the second time round, 2019, the time is right. It seemed suddenly, because I had a Facebook group I'd set up for this, suddenly there was lots of people joining, there was lots of interest coming on. And I think what it was is there was Oxford started up their own library of things, and there was a lot of press about it. And those people were sharing various articles about it, saying, oh, look, and lots of people, there's a growing awareness of the idea and of the need for it. And so renewed activity came along. So like I said, very much growing awareness of need. The idea of the circular economy, the sharing economy, is an idea that's gaining a lot of traction at the moment. There are a number of repair cafes setting up around the place. Let's fix stuff rather than throwing it away. And particularly, a lot of councils, I think most of Cornwall councils, have now declared a climate emergency. Now, this is a bit of a... They don't really know what this... No one really sure what it means, but it's a commitment to doing something to try and address the coming climate emergency. And the councils are there kind of saying, well, what does this mean? We don't know what to do. And they've been reaching out to communities and saying, okay, how can we work together to try and put some things in place to try and reduce our use of resources? And so this made me think this, we've got to do this. So we started things again, and this is my last slide. Okay, so where we are now. So we formed a central steering group, and this time I thought there was a lot more traction. There's only 5 of us involved at the moment, a few people on the outside, but we've all kind of a lot more committed to it, a lot more enthusiastic, and I think we're going to make it happen. I really believe that. We're talking to a number of people about looking at various premises around the place, actively seeking funding, talking to a lot of people, and reaching out to the community, find out what they want, what kind of financial model would work, because obviously this has to be able to sustain itself. We get a lot of funding at the beginning to buy stuff, but you kind of have to keep running. And we're hoping to launch early 2020. And we've got some very ambitious future plans, if we can. Really like the idea of having a kind of Cornwall-wide network. Think about how with a book library, if there's a book you want and they don't have it in the Poole branch, but they've got it up in Bodmin, they'll send it across. So it means you can spread the amount of stuff you have to have less stuff covering a bigger area. And we'd love to have vans to go around, because it's all about community engagement. What about someone who lives in a little village in the middle of nowhere who has very little access to transport? If we could go to people and take stuff to them, that's all these great ideas, but that's all very much for the future. As it is, like I say, we're hoping to start off early 2020 and watch this space. Thank you for your time.